Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Hello, Libration Nation. Well, it's Mother's Day this week, and you guessed it. The Queen came on. That's right. The leader of Libration Nation, the oft-mentioned, never before heard on the podcast airways. That's right. My mom, Patricia Smith, came on the podcast this week. I was so pleased that she was willing to do this. We had a great conversation about the book Marzahn, Mon Amour, which was the winner of the Dublin Literary Award for 2023. And I think this is a great episode. My mom is probably part of the reason I'm here, loving books and literature and libraries. So this was really special, and I hope you enjoy. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Well, here we are.
Are you recording already?
Yeah, I've been recording.
Oh, brother.
This is audio, Mom. This is showbiz.
You better watch what you say.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you're here today with me.
Oh, it's a delight for me, always.
Yes, absolutely. And it was really fun to hear what book you picked for this. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what story we're going to be talking about?
Well, it's a translated German book called Marzahn, Mon Amour by Katja Oskamp. And it's been translated into English, and I read it in the Kindle version of English. And it's also on our library's Hoopla. There's also a German audio read by the author herself. So that is a beautiful touch-up for me, because after I knew what the content was, it was so nice to be able to actually listen in her voice and have confirmed that what I thought I heard or I thought I understood, I really did understand.
Yeah. And also, just to clarify, Hoopla is a library app. So a lot of public libraries, if you have a public library card, you have access to their Hoopla collection. And they, like, a lot of times will have things like that, where it's the German version of a famous story.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's Hoopla. So, yeah, it was cool that you got to read it. So Marzahn.
Okay, Marzahn is in the former East Germany. They had a housing shortage, and so what they did for their government-subsidized housing is to build these giant cement house blocks, like in a whole district. And Marzahn is sort of like in the outskirts of Berlin, East Berlin.
Right.
So a lot of the people that were low on income at the end of their, as they started their retirement, they ended up in one of these apartment houses. And it had a very bad reputation because, of course, it was built on former sewer dumps.
Yeah.
And it smelled at the beginning. But now, of course, it's been all covered over with beautiful grass, and there's plenty of fresh air and plenty of parking. But at the beginning, Marzahn always had a bad reputation. It was like the lowest of the low in East Germany. And I'm talking before the wall came down.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting for people to hear a little bit of, how do you know so much about East Germany or Germany?
Well, I was thinking that you might ask that. And I was trying to say, how can I say this in a short form? But your dad and I fell in love And he became an English teacher in northern Germany. And he
Hamburg,
worked there.
right?
No, up in Braca
Okay.
and Nordenham, which is north of Bremen.
Okay.
And after 6 months, he was the only native English speaker in 3 different schools. And he was riding his bicycle from town to town. So he'd have like 2 hours at this school, and then he'd drive his bicycle a half an hour, and he'd have 3 hours at the other school. And sometimes at night, he'd teach another 2 classes. So the principal said, "Hey, Bill, or Mr. Smith, can you please help us? We need some more English teachers. And do you know anybody?" And he said, "Well, my girlfriend studied English literature." He said, "Good enough. Get her over here. Call her. Let's call her right now." So no kidding, they did call me. It was like 2 o'clock their time and 5 o'clock in the morning my time. And he said, "Patricia, quit your job today. Come over here. I'm going to sign you up for German language school." So that's how I started. I knew I was going to be teaching teenage kids in a trade school.
And how old were you at the time?
Well, I was fresh out of college, about a year out of college, about 23. And I knew it was going to be teenage kids. And I knew I was going to be able to speak, I was going to have to be able to speak enough German so I could get them to behave, you know. And so I was very intent on learning German as fast as I could, which I went to the Goethe language school, which is sort of like the Berlitz school. I was like the only native English speaker in my class. Most of the people were from the East Bloc. They were from South America. They were from Asian countries. They were some from African countries. And so the teacher started off with "Guten Tag, Guten Tag, Guten Tag," and "Wie geht es Ihnen, wie geht es?"
Yeah.
And so everything was taught in German from the first day. So anyway, that's how I got into German. And so Bill and I did take a trip to the Eastern Bloc, which went from East Germany down into Hungary, down into Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic now, and down into Yugoslavia. So I got to see communist Germany in the mid-'70s.
Yeah.
And I actually got to talk to some East Germans then.
Oh.
I knew enough German at that point so I could actually have a conversation with some Germans. And so I've always been interested in East Germany.
Yeah.
So is that sort of a pretty good intro? Oh, here's the one piece I did think I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
So this was like in the mid-'70s, and you were born after that, way after that.
Way after that.
Way after. And so we spoke German well enough. We got invited to a lot of parties. And one time a German guy said, "Hey, when are you guys going to have some little Germans?"
Oh.
And that was my wake-up call. I said, we got home, and I said, "Bill, I'm not going to have a little German. We are not going to have little Germans." He said, "I never said." I said, "Well, that means we got to get home."
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of thinking about going home.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want you to be a little German girl.
Yeah, you wanted me to be a little Southern girl. That's a whole nother story.
Oh, at that point, I didn't know we were going to have Southern kids, but
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I think people, very personal to you life story that not a lot of people have experienced. So, and then of course, integral to the podcast, we have to get to our beverage of choice.
oh yes, here it is.
Here it is, and we went with the Aperol Spritz. And do you want to tell the story of how the Aperol Spritz connects to the book?
Yes, in the sort of middle to later part of the book, the protagonist and her bosses go on a little trip to a spa, a thermal spa, and they swim in the pool, which goes from indoors to outdoors, and then they go in the sauna, and they're having a wonderful, wonderful time. And they do each other's feet. They take care of each other's feet, and they take care of each other's makeup and everything. And then they go into the little bar, and they order these Aperol Spritz.
Yeah.
And do you want to tell me what's in it?
Yeah, so Aperol Spritz, it's an Italian beverage, and so it's sparkling wine. I did go with a Prosecco from Italy, and then it's Aperol liqueur, and then club soda. And you can put a orange garnish on there as well. They're really pretty, so here, cheers, enjoy.
Cheers.
Yeah, or Prost in German.
Yep, some bowl. Oh, isn't that refreshing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this would be perfect for a spa day.
Yeah. So who were you when you read this book?
Okay. I need to also mention that my degree is in English literature, so I loved reading lots of books in college, and I took a lot of short story classes, and I took one comparative literature course. And I really like for the novel or the short story to have a protagonist, maybe an antagonist, and I want them to have a conflict, and I want to have them to have a climax in the story, and I want to have a resolution of the story, okay? So this is the classical idea of a novel or a short story. I also like to have very good character development. I like to be intrigued by the character. I like to learn something new about the way they live or where they live and things like that. So what I do at the beginning of the year, which I did this year, is I go online and I check out podcasters that put out their best of 2023. And I listen to it, and if the stories intrigue me, I'll say, hey, let me go see if it's available in the library. Or if it's not available, sometimes I'll get it on Kindle or I'll buy it, or somehow or another I'll get it. And so I found out about Marzahn, Mon Amour, and I said, Ma, that sounds perfect, right up my alley. It has character development, and it's German, and it's East German, and I love stories about East Germany. So that's where I was when I heard about it.
Yeah, and I think this is probably a appropriate time for me to bring up some stuff that I've looked into with the story, which I also have read now at your recommendation. And it won the Dublin Award in 2023, which you're nodding, so you know.
That's why it got on people's lists. Because the Dublin Award, they awarded her 75,000 euros, and they awarded the translator also 25,000 euros. And that's not, or the Nobel Novel Prize. But it's people take recognition and say, hey, man, I would like to get the Dublin Award too. So it gave her a lot of recognition, and it really skyrocketed her on the international horizon.
And I think the cool thing about the Dublin Award is authors, publishers, agents cannot submit for this. The only public libraries can submit for the Dublin Award. So it's almost like, a crowd favorite and more of a passion project. So I was looking at previous winners or shortlists on it, and it's none of the all-stars are on it. It's really people like Oscamp and other people who maybe don't get their moment in the sun. That's really really cool for the Dublin Award. So good for her.
So I was really happy that I was going to get to read something about East Germany. And we were on a conversation with some of our friends in Germany, and I was asking the woman if she knew about it. She said, no. She said, what's the name of the town? I said, Marzahn.
In Berlin.
She said, you mean Berlin, Marzahn? I said, yeah. I said, it's supposed to be really I hadn't read it. And she said, I can't believe that. She said, I'll try to look it up, though.
Okay. Well, it's getting some love in the U.S. now, so that's good. And I have to tell you, since you told me about it, I have a coworker who's German, from Bonn. And she started picking it up, and she is loving it.
Yeah.
And she was telling me how she's listening to it in German as
Yeah.
well on Hoopla.
Yeah.
And is loving the Berliner accent. And she was saying, and I'm pretty ignorant to I know a lot about Germany, but at the same time, I don't know a lot about Germany. And but she was telling me that the reputation for Berliners is they're very friendly, very talkative, and she just said she was getting that like friendly vibe from the story.
I was thinking that if we were to give a comparison to American personalities or American types, like these people that are described in the book, it would be sort of like the Roseanne show, the working woman.
Yeah.
Very matter of fact and very dry humor.
Yeah.
And a little bit snide. And that's how the voice of this book comes across, you know. Most of these characters have been through some really tough times in their life. They're older than me, probably. They were born early 40s. And so they were babies when the war was ending.
Yeah.
But then they became East Germans.
Yeah.
And they had to live in, in the communist lifestyle.
Yeah.
So a lot of them have been through very difficult times. And when the wall came down, a lot of them lost their jobs because, what they were making in the factories was no longer competitive with the rest of the world.
Right.
So, and of course, they were people by the time the wall came down, let's see, from 45 to 89, they were 45 themselves, right?
Yeah.
So they were, mid-level people that they were the first to get cut from their jobs.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of the reason why they ended up in government-subsidized housing. Because all they had was their monthly welfare checks.
It's a very complex story. And I think what we've covered a lot we have not touched on. What is this story about?
I'm sorry.
No,
sort of jumped the gun.
No, me too. I mean, there's so much richness to this.
Yeah.
Tale.
Well, like I said, I love character development. And this woman, Katja Oskamp, she, true to life, she was turning 45 years old, and her last book that she had created was rejected by the publishers. So she wasn't making any money for a long period of time. And her husband got sick, and so she said, hey, man, I got to start earning some money somehow. So I thought she was very realistic, and she said, I'm going to go and learn how to be what we would call a pedicure beautician. I used to call her podiatrist, but Bill said, your dad said, no, a podiatrist is a real doctor. So these people are not real doctors. They're trained and they're certified, and they wear the white uniforms, but they're not really. They're beauticians more. But they have to be careful because they're cutting on people's feet. And so she went to a 3-day course in the middle of Berlin, Charlottenburg, and she got certified. And she's actually working 2 days a week still in Marzahn. And she has like 60 customers, and they come back like every 4 weeks, every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks. And she just, at night when she got home, she would start writing about the people she was meeting. Because, the crazy thing about getting your hair done or going to a beautician or even your pedicure, manicure, you start talking private stuff to people that you hardly even know.
Yeah.
Because you figure, hey, we're going to be spending an hour together. I might as well just talk a little bit with her or him or whatever. So I love Katja Oskamp because she obviously loves meeting new people, and she loves giving them the benefit of the doubt and not being judgmental and accepting them for who they are. And she's able to describe that in a very wonderful way. Mm-hmm. So that's what the book is about, her clients, mm-hmm. and how much she loves her clients. And even after she finished publishing the book, she still wants to work with them. So I think that's wonderful that she still loves talking to, strangers and meeting them, and she treats them like kings and queens. Mm-hmm. She sits on a little footstool below them, and she treats them like a queen or like Mary Magdalena. Mm-hmm. She said, I don't wash them with my hair, but I give them as much love as Mary Magdalena gave. And they love it because for some of them, it's the first time anyone ever treated them like that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very touching.
Yeah, absolutely. And so each chapter kind of rotates through her clients.
Yeah.
And so were there any of the clients in particular that stood out to you?
Yes. And I don't want to be a spoiler.
Well, I don't think...
But I'll just say there's a wide variety of people. There's truckers. Mm-hmm. One woman that is very heartbreaking is she was actually a Latvian. Her mother was Latvian, mm-hmm. and her dad was a German who got conscripted into the war.
Yes.
And
when was she born? I'm trying to remember.
She was born just before he got conscripted, mm-hmm. or while he got conscripted. And so the mother, she was trying to track him down after a couple of years, and she never got the first letter from him or anything. Yeah. And so they decided they were going to go to the last place where he was located, and they never found any indication of his burial or anything. They decided they were going to stay in, I don't know what part of Germany it was. I don't think it was Berlin, but they decided they were going to stay there in the hope that somehow he would come back and find them. Mm. And, of course, he never did.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, the mother couldn't speak German. The child couldn't speak German. And they had to take very menial jobs their whole lives. The girl, she started working in orphanages and things and taking care of other people's children. And she never had any money to buy new shoes. And her feet went bad on her. And so that's one of the reasons she started to come to these, what do you call it, pedicurist?
Yeah. Podiatrist junior.
Yeah, beautician. Yeah. But, so anyway, it was really heartbreaking, some of the... Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then there's really funny things that happen. Like there's one guy who was the former bloc leader, mm-hmm. A communist bloc leader. Mm-hmm. And he still, 20 years after the wall came down, he still considered himself a cut above everybody else.
Right, yeah.
And he actually bragged to her. Mm-hmm. This is his beautician, okay? He bragged to her that he had 51 different partners in his life.
Yeah.
And would she not want to be number 52? Because he got this brand new pill from his doctor, and he's really wanting to try it out. And she said, "No, sir, I'm happily married, and I'm not interested." Mm-hmm. And he said, "Well, can I at least take a picture with you?" He said, "No." She said, "No pictures, no pictures." But anyway, it's there's lots of different characters in it, and mm-hmm. there's some really bittersweet and funny things that go on.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you were talking earlier about how you like a classical storyline and the protagonist. We know who the protagonist is. Mm-hmm. I think that something that stood out to me with this story is it felt very German. It felt very European in the fact that a lot of times, especially in American fiction, which I love, there is a lot going on. There is always action.
Yeah.
Things are happening. This story was very internal.
Yeah.
And reading it, I couldn't put my finger on if there was really a climax.
Well, there was.
Okay.
So while they were at the spa, and she's at the spa with her co-worker, there's two others. There's the woman who owns the whole spa, and then there's the woman who does massages. And so they're in the water, I think, and they're having a wonderful time splashing around. And she said, "I love Marzahn. Marzahn is my love, and mon amour." And she had already written on the very first page of the book that she was sort of in a in-between stage of her life. She was in her mid-40s, and she didn't know how it was going to progress.
Yeah. Do you mind if I read the actual first opening statement?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because it's striking because it's at the beginning and then
Yeah.
the end, and all right. So, the middle years, when you're neither young nor old, are fuzzy years. You can no longer see the shore you started from, but you can't get a clear view enough of the shore you're heading for. You spend these years thrashing about in the middle of a big lake, out of breath, flagging from the tedium of swimming. You pause at a loss and turn around in circles again and again. Fear sets in, the fear of sinking halfway, without a sound, without a cause.
Yeah.
So, anyway, sorry to interrupt you. I just thought it was striking.
It's really good, and that leads me to something else, which I'll get to in a second. But so she does have a climax. At that point in this, she realizes that she has found fulfillment in, going one-on-one with all these different people and bringing out the beauty of their lives and being able to express it. And so she feels like she and I think she even talks about it, that she is, maybe it was on the very end of the book where she says, "I think I am finding my way to the border of the lake now.
Yeah.
I'm finding my way out of the middle of the lake, and I can see my future now." So she did have her climax. She did have a problem, and she did have her climax that she resolved. And now, what I wanted to also mention to you is that is very beautiful, what you just read in English, but it's even more beautiful in the German because it's more heartfelt,
Right.
And what I wanted to mention that when I was taking courses in college, the comparative literature professor said, "Now you guys, you should be reading in the original language." So we all raised our hands and said, "Professor, that ain't happening." I had 5 years of French, but I can't hardly read Camus' Le Stranger.
Right.
So he said, "Well, I just want you to know that you're missing out on something by not reading it in the original."
Yeah.
And so I ended up writing a book report on Heinrich Böll, the clown, But of course I read it in English. And now when I read this book, and then I had lucked out and I got to listen to it in German. There's one woman in the book who always has the habit of saying, "That's what I was about to say. That sounds cool and everything." We might say in the modern language, "That's what I'm talking about." But in the German, it's, "Das wollte ich gerade sagen." And she says it in the East German dialect. And it sounds so cute when she says it. "Wollte ich gerade sagen." Every few minutes. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there are things that get lost in the translation. So I have to give kudos to my professor. He was right.
Yeah.
Everyone should be able to understand a little bit of a foreign language so they can understand the tone of what people are actually saying.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good point. So, to all the listeners out there, if you do not know another language,
Get on it.
get with the times.
You're missing out.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a great book. And I thought she did a great job of not only treating the people beautifully, it's almost like a missionary to seniors. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of these seniors could hardly wait till they came back in 4 weeks, Mm-hmm. And oh my gosh. There's one woman in a wheelchair who had polio as a child, and she's very upbeat and
Right.
like a little child saw her going by in her wheelchair, and he asked his mother, "Is she sick, Mama?" And the woman heard it, Frau Blumeyer, and she said, "Not in my head, only in my feet."
Yeah.
So very upbeat stories.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and I think it's interest. I mean, hear stories from other countries from different viewpoints like that. I don't know how often most Americans reach out or branch out in that direction. So I think this would definitely be a good starting point. And on that note, I mean, who would you recommend this story for?
Well, first of all, anyone who's been to the Eastern Bloc and understands some of the difficulties these people have been through, and to hear how they overcame them, I think is very encouraging. And I think what they call the Wessis, the people that live in former West Germany, they enjoy listening to it too, because there are many, many years, over 50 years, where they had almost no contact with what was going on over there. So now they are enjoying hearing about how some of these people live. So it's not just people that know them, people that want to know something about a new culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would also say, what about she is talking about middle-aged as well. And I had, as I said, we talked about earlier, it won the Dublin Literary Award. Mm-hmm. So I was reading Irish news about it, and there was a quote from the Irish Times that said, Marzahn, Mon Amour is a masterclass in perspective with a Zen-like understanding of life, aging, and death. And I find that very accurate. And although I don't feel like I'm out in the middle of a lake right now.
No.
I mean, I could relate. I could understand what she was talking about. And I was thinking, it would be a good book for someone who's going through that.
Lost their place, where they're going, their direction in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a quote, what is it? When you don't know what to do something good for someone else.
Yeah.
And that's basically what she does. She also needs a craft. She needs to make money.
Yeah.
But she ends up in a service role and really embraces it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was a great story. Like I said, I loved it. Monica said to tell you thank you for letting her know about it. And honestly, I have already recommended it to a few people who are interested. I had another coworker whose husband's going to Germany.
Yeah.
And I was like, was he going to Berlin? And she said, yeah. I was like, it's not very long.
No.
I think I put it down a couple hours altogether. Yeah. So highly
recommend. You're a fast reader. You're a very fast reader. I think when I'm listening to it on the book, in the German version, I think it's a 4-hour listen.
Okay.
So you knocked it out pretty fast.
Well, it was very good. I mean, there's other short stories that takes me a lot longer to get through. So.
Yeah.
Well, and also I did want to also point out, going back to the Dublin Award and what you were saying about, she kind of got discouraged with her writing career, then she did this. I mean, it is sort of hitting a lottery ticket to win that award. And that is something like with the publishing industry, they have machines they can turn on, and that's what gets people looking at your book and attention to it. And so I think it's really special when someone like Oscom can have such a great story that otherwise would be overlooked.
Yeah.
And here's an opportunity for people to pick up on something wonderful that they would never have heard of otherwise if it weren't for awards like that. So I thought that was really special. And I think I need to read more Dublin Award winners because it's going to take you outside of your comfort zone for sure.
Yeah. I do too. I have a lot of trouble finding books, like I said before, that meet my criteria. I end up reading a lot of murder mysteries. Okay, who's the killer this time? Okay, how did they... I'm more interested in what kind of furniture they have in their house and what kind of garden they have in the backyard.
Well, there's a lot to be said with setting and... All right. Well, thanks, Mom, for joining me.
My pleasure, Gigi.
Thanks. Your entree into the podcasting world. I can't wait to see where you go from here.
Oh, yeah. Maybe not so far.
Maybe back on here.
Yeah, if you twist my arm a little.
Okay. All right.
Love you, girl.
Love you, too.
All right.
Bye. Thank you for spending some time with me and my guest for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.